On this Friday. Hope you're feeling great. Hope you're in line with everything that you want to accomplish, everything that you want to do in this lifetime. We are about to, on this Friday, get into the Logic User Guide. This tutorial has been going on the last couple of weeks, and we're just so excited to really give you the realest information in the game today. So if you're ready to cover all things audio and MIDI quantization, we're going to finalize chapter 8, and then we will get into the next frontier. So let's get into it. Let's close out chapter 8, and we'll go from there. Here we go. You ready? Man, I hope you're feeling good today. Just reminding you to put the most important things in your life first. I need to get some energy going, so you know what we're gonna do. Eddie Gray Logic User Guide and Tutorial brought to you by, that's right, hfmusicacademy.com. Let's go! All right. Here we go. All right, we got to pump it up. Got to get some energy going here. We're going to finish off this chapter. It's been a long one. It's been extensive for those of you that are with me on this journey. I know it's a long climb, but I'm telling you, it feels so good at the top. So let's go ahead and let's rise to the very top. Let's take this summit all the way, and we will go from there. My name is Eddie Gray. I'm your host. We're going to go through all of the parameters. Today is really almost about reviewing the last section because there was so many details. There were so many ins and outs. There were so many contingencies, like if I do this, then I have to do that. And so I really want to solidify this chapter by having this Friday fun video or Fun Friday video. And I really thought that would be the best use of our time. So I want to go right in because I'm really eager to share this information, especially regarding MIDI region parameters, because when you actually learn the MIDI region parameters, you'll find that the audio region parameters are way easier to understand. So that being the case, we are going to just jump right in and we are going to crush it. Let's go. So as you may have remembered, we read the audio region parameters. We covered them extensively. A lot of them are easy. Some of them are not. Something else that we're going to cover in today's session are the advanced quantization parameters. These, often overlooked, can do a lot by way of creating variation, creating dynamics. And so it's something that we have to cover if we really want to have some options and flexibility when we work in our music production sessions. So we're not going to read this again. I've prepared a session in advance to really give you the kind of bite-sized Reader's Digest version, right? Just a really compact way of understanding this. So let's start from the very top. We're going to start with MIDI in terms of the details. But before we get to that, here we have an audio track. This is a loop. Now, pay no mind to the input. That's just my microphone. So we know that if we utilize Apple loops, there is some metadata, some extra features that we get to access. Primarily speed. This is something where we can play something in double time or half time and beyond. So that's a great feature. You can utilize that if you're using Apple loops and if you're using untagged loops as well. This is something that we were kind of investigating with detail. And let's see if I can pull one of these in really quick. This should be good. Bring in a vocal chant. So again, this is a third party untagged loop. And so we get the reverse functionality, but we don't get that speed functionality. So what if I drag my own loop inside here do I get that same functionality? Well, let's try this out. If I drag in this robot, let's go ahead and check sound. I wonder if it'll work if I do this. I think it will. Hold on. Yeah. Here we go. Checking sound. Yeah. So if I then take this file and then I drag it back inside the loop browser. Remember, this is an untagged loop. So we'll theoretically tag it. I literally just drag and dropped it. And then I'll just, for fun, put tagged. I can always delete this later. Okay. And let's say you put all the bells and whistles, right? The genre, all the tags. Then I hit create. We want to see if anything changes. Okay, so let's go into the library. Type in robot. And it's right here at the bottom. So we'll drag it in. And still. So if you have a third-party loop, you have access to reversing it, but not the speed functionality, even if you tag it within the Apple ecosystem. Now, of course, if you wanted to change up the speed, you could. If you watch my video on stretching out tracks or compressing them on the channel, then you know that you can just easily do that, and you can check that video out for reference. So you're not necessarily limited, but I just want to be clear about a lot of these details. So if I record a track, it's really the same thing. I get the reverse feature here, and this is a third-party loop that I dragged and we get reverse. If I'm inside of flex time, we lose the capability of reversing. Now, of course, you could do it beforehand, bounce it, and there's workarounds. But I just want to be clear about all these contingencies. Like if I press this, what happens? And so I just want to make sure you know so that nothing ever feels awkward or weird. So the only thing that you really have that has the full functionality at all times are these Apple loops. Okay, so with that out of the way, delete all this. I'm just going to have one audio track, blue, and one software instrument track, Midi, green. And so then what we're going to do here is we're going to listen just for reference. Let's put the stereo out down so we don't blow out our ears. And then I'll resize the region inspector, press play, and then we'll start playing with the parameters up here. Okay, so just as a reminder, we have the region inspector on the top left. This is what we're covering right now. But you should also pay mind to the track inspector, which can help you out as well. But for now, let's go ahead and look at some of these parameters. We know that if we start to play with swing, something special is going to happen. Okay, notice I never even hit quantize. It just kind of happened by default. And so let me see if I can do this again. I think this is important. So let's go orchestra, harpsichord. Let's see, it's somewhere in here. Orchestra, harpsichord. Where is it? Let me type this in one more time. Orchestra, harp, chord. Okay. I don't see it. Here, let me just drag this one in. Okay, so this has not been quantized yet. Okay, and so then I'm going to kind of bring your attention to the region inspector, and you can see that this Q swing or quantization swing has not been enabled. It's dimmed out, and that's simply because we don't have a quantization value set. As soon as you turn on the quantize mode, if you will, you start to access more options. What did we get there? Well, we saw that the swing turned on, but then in addition, right below that, you have some advanced parameters that we were touching on last time. Let me see if I can Command Z some of this stuff. Okay. Okay, so we're back here, and look at the bottom of the screen here. These are all dimmed out, and so is that one. And as soon as we turn on quantize, now they become available. Okay, so that's something that is good to look at and understand, right? Sometimes I'll look at menu items and I don't even understand why they're there. And so it's important to just kind of look at these things for a quick second. And so we're here listening to the harpsichord, and because we're playing with the swing value, it's going to change the timing of this. From what I understand, every second and fourth note move over, but I think it has more to do with just the overall, the feel of it as well. So go ahead and just look at the notes and how they kind of start shifting. See how they start shifting over, right? So then what originally was just a perfectly kind of stale performance, take a listen, becomes something really entirely different. Check it out. Hold on, let me just move this over enough. Let me see. That should be good. Check it out. So, right, some of these notes are going to be closer. Now, of course, this is a harpsichord. They didn't have swing back in the days of Bach, but I just kind of wanted you to see kind of how these things will move around. This is more applicable for, anything modern, hip hop, pop, but that's how it gets started. Okay, you want to make sure that you increase or decrease the value. So at a value of 0, everything's just quantized right down the middle. As soon as you start to increase the swing, you'll start seeing some behavior change. Now, this directly correlates with the piano roll inspector right here. So, right, 16th note, but they don't necessarily have to. Check this out. I can have a value of an 8th note in the piano roll inspector and a value of 16th notes in the region inspector. Now, why is that? That would seem a bit contradictory, but if you really think about it, it's not. And here's why. We have the regions themselves, right? I can have 2 regions on one track. Conversely, we have the Midi event data, each of these on and off messages and more inside of the menu here. And so it's understandable that we can have a quantization value of 16th notes and yet still change the value of, say, the melodic line or the right hand. Check this out. If a harpsichord player was playing this, most likely a lot of this would be with the right hand. Listen with that in context, and then I'll explain the rest. Okay, so that makes sense. This would be the left hand, and then that chord would be the left hand as well, probably. I'm not a harpsichord player, but I would assume that. And so then what's interesting is I can change the value of the melody per se. And I guess I'll take these notes too by holding shift and creating an extra selection. And then I can create a quantization value. Let's do something dramatic. Quarter notes, which will really change everything, but the chord progression or the harmonic progression can still be sustained and played at a quantization level of 16th notes. So this is how we can pull this off. The melodic line or the fast stuff is on the right hand and being quantized to quarter notes, while the chords themselves are being quantized to 16th notes. So look, don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I just want to give you options. A first, a second, and a third option is plenty. And that's what I'm looking for. Make sure you're well equipped. Make sure you have everything you need to fulfill on the journey of your musical endeavors. So this is all good. This feels good, looks good. And so something else that I want to point out here is, sure, we can also transpose by hitting Shift Option up arrow key and down. So we're jumping up an octave, but you can also use the region inspector to lift up the entire thing just like that. And this also is based on a key command from what I remember. Yeah. So let's go ahead and hit Command Z to all that. So these menu items can be related, but are not necessarily directly influenced. So just make sure you understand what's what. That's the whole point of this. And so I found another correlation yesterday in my studies, And that's when you quantize something, we know it could be perfectly on the grid, as you can see right now, perfectly on the grid as soon as I hit quantize. Now, quarter notes are simply just not going to cut it. So we're going to bring this back to 16th notes. Everything is perfectly on the grid. That's awesome. That works. But what if I wanted to change it a little bit? Maybe not by way of swing, because that's probably a bit too, hip. Maybe it's just not the right tool for the right job. But what if I change the quantization strength? I can change the quantization strength, and that in and of itself is yet another tool. So I have a quantization strength slider here inside the piano roll, and I also have one here, but not by way of a slider. We can numerically input different information. So we can double click, change the quantization strength, or we can also click and drag up and down. And it performs the same exact function. Now, what's interesting is here, we're performing it on a region level. Does that make sense? So we're performing it here. Hold on. We're performing it here. There is data that is embedded in this region right here. But if I then perform actions which are contrary to the information that I embedded and written in here, then it's going to affect the entire performance. So there is information here that we can also embed in your Midi events. So let's just be clear about this. We have Midi events, and we can embed information via the piano roll inspector, and we have Midi regions on a region basis, not on a track basis. This is the track here, right? And of course, the track encompasses all the regions if there were more regions. And so this is why we have a track inspector, because the track inspector directly correlates to the track. The region inspector directly correlates to the region. And then lastly, the piano roll here correlates with the information on the screen. Okay, so glad that we took the time to kind of cover all that. It's very necessary. And so I just wanted to take a second because I felt like there was a lot of information there, and we really had to take our time. Again, we spend 10, 20, 30 minutes learning it now. You won't ever have to learn it again. Unless Logic 11 is a complete 180, and even if they change the GUI and everything, still the mechanics will be the same, more or less. And so it's very important to take the time to learn this. Okay, so we know that the quantization strength here is related to the quantization strength here. You're not going to see this visually, but we can create a correlation. I'll show you what I mean. Let me just make sure everything is set to work. Yeah, okay. So look, if I have a quantization strength of 100, everything is on the grid. I mean, money, right? If I then change this to 0, hold on. Okay, yeah, everything has to be selected. You can see that now it's off the grid. And let's particularly pay attention to, set your eyes on a couple of notes, maybe like these 4, just so that we can really look at this clearly, okay? So then what I'm going to do is I'll lift up the knob, the slider rather, and it's not working simply because everything has to be selected, right? So I'll select everything and I'll drag it. So at a strength of 100%, everything is on the grid. So then if I bring this up to 100%, and this one's at 100%, if I drag this down, theoretically, you should see the same changes that we saw in the piano roll inspector. So this is how we know there's a direct correlation. Now, you could, of course, have a symbiotic relationship where this one's up a little bit and this one is down, but really there's no point in doing that. I just want to be clear that these two are directly related. That one and that one, okay? Okay, now what is not related are these other ones, and I want to explain how. So when we go into the quantization velocity or Q velocity. Check this out. This is really fascinating. If you look at the overall color scheme of my velocity values, right? We're looking at this in terms of velocity, how you can change that if you ever want to change it by going into view, okay? And then set no color. And how do you want to view these MIDI events? By the region color, by the velocity values, which we're currently looking at now, or by the Midi channel. Now, Midi channel is a whole nother thing, and I've got some great info for you in regards to it. But here we are by velocity. Okay. Then, if we want to create a variation on the theme, or maybe it's just not quite right, and you've been tugging at it, playing, trying to, poke a stick at it, but it doesn't work. It's not alive yet. Then an option for you is to use quantization velocity. Look at what it does. Fascinating. If I lift it up, it's going to change the velocity values based on their positioning. So in other words, if this one is red, it will go down to the other way, which is, a lower velocity value. And let's find something blue, which is a lower, or purple, a lower velocity value. And check out what happens. If I lift this up, it's going to go up. And it only gets to green because there's a relationship between all the different offsets. So let's listen to a performance at 0, which is basically the way you played it in. So let's check, and let me change the quantization strength. So everything's at 0, everything's on the grid, at least it is now. And let's take a listen. Okay, so you know what that sounds like. Let's raise up the quantized velocity. Listen to this, a new experience. So this time the harmonic chord, a lot softer, right? There's more emphasis on the melody. Listen again. And this could be a really cool thing for your song. Let's do it the other way around. So go back to 0. Check it out. See, here the emphasis is on the chord and less on the melody. So what happens if I go all the way to the other spot? Ooh, this looks different. Let's try this out. So this is going to play with your velocity values. I think this is more of a creative tool than anything. Perhaps maybe you played everything a little bit too hard. And so if I drop, like, let's pretend that these chords here were really, by holding Option, I can make these all uniform. You see how I'm sliding this left and right? So I'm making these all red. So here, let's check this out. I'm going to go into Q velocity, drag this down. These should go down and everything else will go up depending on its value. If it's a little bit higher, it'll come down lower. If it's a little, it's almost like compression for velocity. But let's go ahead and drag this down. All right, so the inverse is true. Sorry, I meant up. So if you go up, again, the value of the chord is now going down while everything else is going up unless it was already high to begin with. I'm not sure how the computation works, but now we have this. Right? If I go back to the original idea, or at least the original when I set the velocity to 127 or all reds, check it out. So that's how that works. All right. So then this is a creative tool that we have available to us. How does quantization length affect us? In the same manner, you can change things up dynamically, create variation. We can change up the length of the MIDI notes. Check it out. Look at this. Let's just say I go to a positive value. I can restrict the notes so that they're shorter. Now they're all becoming a lot shorter. Now let's check out this variation on the theme, if you will. Okay, if I increase that, no, I'm not looking for swing. Wrong one. Let's go back to length, and I'll just make that a little bit longer. Let's check this out. So now we have a velocity creative tool, if you will. That's not the way that they explain it inside of the user guide, but it's worth mentioning. Then we have the quantization length. option, which allows us to play with the length. Again, this can create a nice turnaround, a nice B section, a nice breakdown. And then we have flam, which basically creates arpeggios. Let me show you what I mean. If I have this here and I raise up the Q flam, look at the way that this is positioned now. See how it's playing these kind of offset, right? Let me go ahead and quantize these all to the grid. Okay, cool. And then Q flam's going up. Here we go. Good. Now I'm not sure why it's not playing that one. But anyway, listen to this. Right now, I don't know if I would raise up the flam that much, but you know, maybe something like this. Maybe maybe you don't know how to play chords per se in terms of like really getting your hands on the piano, like you know, or maybe you want to play something really rapid, but you really don't have that ability. If you just play the chord, you can record that. Let me hit Shift R to capture that. Let's see, did I? Oh, that gave me everything else too. Hold on, let me just hit. All right, let me just hit that one more time. So let's see, the chord is somewhere over here. There it is right there. I'll delete all these. I'll select these and then hit, I don't know if that's colon or semicolon, but something. Hit Q. We'll bring that over here. Okay, so then by using flam, these will move. And again, nothing's quantized, so we're not going to see the values until we enable that. And now look at this. Look how nice that is. See that? So now it's creating a nice flam, and this can be really accentuated like this. That's kind of romantic, very nice. So let's raise that up an octave. That's a lot more interesting to me than, let's go back to 0. Go here. Right? So that's a flam. Really nice. Okay, quantization strength we already talked about. There's only one more thing that we have to cover, and then we'll look at this within the audio region parameter to better understand it. I just feel like if we study it first in this manner, it's so much easier to get because visually the information is right in front of us. So let's look at, here we go. Let's look at this line again. Okay, and so then we know that this is very technical technique. It requires a little bit of musical sensibilities, like really knowing what you're doing. So if you have a performance and it's pretty much in the pocket, but there are a couple notes that are rushed or need to get closer to the grid, this is a good tool to help you. All right, and we'll read up again, but let's drag this down to a negative value, and you really need to look at the notes to understand how it's affecting the performance as a whole. And so I'll bring this down. Let's go. And so look what's happening here. Changing the overall performance, moving notes around in a very interesting way. I'm still wrapping my head around exactly what it's doing, but obviously it seems like it has a lot to do with the performance. So if I take this down to 0, so I just want to reset and neutralize everything just to make sure we're getting the actual data. There's not a lot of information about how these are all related. So these are all assumptions, and these are all, just, it takes time to really understand what these things do. And this is based on the user guide, by the way. So when I drag the Q range down, now, not seeing much happening. Try it again. Nothing. So it seems like this is in some way related to the rest of them. In other words, if I have velocity up here, maybe I'll, I don't know, change the quantization strength. There we go. Okay. So maybe that'll help too, because I had the quantization strength at 0. So again, Q range. Okay, now we're seeing some action going. Now, last thing here is I'm not sure if the quantization value affects it or not. That was one of the things that I was trying to wrap my head around. Was it looks like it does and it makes sense, but again, because it doesn't mention it, there's very little information in regards to Q range. And so here's one variation on the theme. If I go to a negative value of 456, which sounds pretty cool, actually. I kind of like the feel. It has a very human feel, whereas this, at a value of 16th, of course, would sound more like just a little too generic, a little too classical music. So I believe that this is a great feature. Again, still a lot to learn in terms of what it actually does. When I go into the help tag, again, we're not, let's see, logic MIDI region parameters. Okay, let's see if we get some more information here. We talked about Q swing. It says alters the position of every second point in the current quantization grid. So remember I said every second and fourth. So obviously 2 times 2 is 4. Values per 50% delay, values under 50% pre-delay. So if you go one way, it's going to pull. If you go the other way, it's going to push. And then we know we talked about the practicality of 50 to 75%. Okay, so we are now in the advanced parameters, and we talked about delay dynamics. All that made sense. Was simple, right? Clip length, right? Lets you alter the length of the last note. So basically, it's either going to play out if it's outside of a MIDI region border or not. Watch the last video for reference. But what we're getting into here is the Q range. So let's look very closely to try and understand this. It says it's a very musical quantization method, and it requires a certain amount of technical musical prowess. It's ideal for recordings that already have the right groove. Okay, so spot on performance, it's there, but a little too hurried or a little too laid back. So the way I'm thinking about this is you've used quantization, maybe you've used quantized strength, and it's not quite right yet. I think this is a second resort. That's the way I'm looking at it. That's the way I'm explaining it. Allows you to retain the original feel, but positions the rhythmic center precisely in the groove. Now, how it does that, no idea, but I think it just gives you another variation on the theme. Maybe if it's closer to the grid, it lines it up, and if it's not, it moves it away. I don't know. But a value of 0 means everything is on the grid, quantized, right? Down the middle. If you enter a negative value, which I was doing, only the notes that fall outside the actual range are moved to the ideal quantization grid positions. So it seems like there's a lot of thought being put here by the algorithm, while notes closer to an ideal position remain unquantized. See what I'm saying? So if it's closer to the grid, it's going to stay there. And if it's not, it's going to move it. This moves the most poorly played notes to the perfect timing positions. So again, really fascinating, really interesting feature that I believe more experimentation and just really more follow through is really going to uncover a lot of the answers here. So go ahead and play with it. I'll give you one last example here. So if this is set to 0, again, everything should be on the money. And then if I start to change it, we start to see and uncover something new. For example, this is a little bit off. This one's off, right? There's a little bit more variation to the performance in general, right? A little bit more performance. Now, this is a really high value, negative 430. Let's see what it sounds like. So that to me sounds way more human, right? Has a bit of that human touch. Let's go negative 200, right? Maybe not so off the grid. Let's check it out. And all of a sudden, it just changed right away. Let me see if I can. Okay, let's listen to this. Let me see. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Hope that makes sense. Just wanted to go over some of those details. Please think about these creatively, and I think you'll find the value and in the application. And of course, when you're experimenting, when you're in the experimentation phase, I think you can yield some really solid results. So if I mute that and we go into audio, now this kind of becomes a little bit clearer because the waveforms are not as easy to see in terms of how the transients move and whatnot. So in order to, quantize audio, we have to turn on flex time. Command F opens up the window. And then if I use 16th note, this is an interesting drum beat, so it's not down the middle. I'm going to use a triplet value, and I believe we're going to talk more about this later. But you can see everything's been analyzed. It's kind of, to the grid. Everything's looking good. I have a quantization value of 100. If I go down to 0, sounds like this. So it has a different feel. Look at the transients and how they line up to the grid as I bring this up to 100. So the quantization strength will determine how on the grid it is. And some people might like it off the grid. Some people might like it on. I just want you to have the option. So that is easy to understand. Now, let's go ahead and look at the Q range, because that is also part of the audio region parameter. We were looking at the Midi region parameters. Now we're looking at audio. And so then everything else, really easy to follow. Q swing changes every second and fourth note, right? This will sound a little bit different at a value of 96. Take a listen. Sounds okay, but it sounds like the audio is, it's degraded, so it's not going to work. So let's go back down to this. All right, good. So we'll leave that where we started. Okay, so Q range, though. This is what we want to look at. So theoretically, not everything is perfectly on the grid per the waveforms, right? All the transients. So with this view in mind, let's see if maybe this is a better view. Nah, I think this one's a little bit better. All right, Q range, we're going to drag and drop. And now look, it's influencing the positioning of all the various parts in the song, right? It's not the same. Here, let me zoom in a little tighter. I'll hit Command Z, or let's just go with 0 here inside of Q range. Take a look. 1, 2. Okay. If I drag that down, that starts moving stuff around, right? And so that is it. Just wanted to make sure that we got clear on that and how it works. The way I'm looking at it now, just to, again, quickly assimilate, is this is just a creative tool. And it's something that I can use, and I will try it from time to time, especially if I just need another idea. If I need a second recourse, I need somewhere else to go, then I'll try it out. So clearly not on the grid, but not necessarily off. It's just a different feel, and you'll especially hear it in the context of an actual track, because, if everything is quantized, you're going to really hear how it deviates. So anyway, my good friends, I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought it was worth our time, and so let's make sure that we go back into the user guide just to make sure we got everything. Yup, we got Q range. Again, the magic here is only the notes that fall outside the set range are moved to ideal quantized grid positions. So the range is determined by this value. And how it's all happening, I'm not exactly sure. But again, the result is whatever is poorly played, that outside the range that's determined here, then that will determine the timing positions. Okay, we know that this isn't true. We found this to be true yesterday. It says the fade and gain parameters are available for standard audio regions, but not for Apple loops. So we saw that that wasn't true. We know that we can reverse as well. Yeah, and even this second statement was false as well. Okay, MIDI region parameters. We covered everything at length. Everything's great. Gate time, clip length. Really like this feature. If you don't know what it does, check out the last video. And then finally, cue range, the same. The same. Okay, so now we're going to apply all these MIDI region parameters permanently, forever. And so in order to do that, we go to functions, MIDI region parameters, apply all parameters permanent. Why would you want to do this? Maybe you lock in the best performance. You like the feel. You don't want anything to change. You don't want anything to be a mistake, right? You don't want to, I don't know, maybe you hit option up arrow key and you change something by mistake. Well, another way to do it just really quick is if you go into configure track header and you enable the on and off feature here, you can literally just turn that off and pay no mind to the track. But probably a better solution, in all fairness, is to protect it. Now, I've protected it. So let's just say I try and, I don't know, maybe I delete something by mistake. Logic says, can't do that. All right, so then what if I try and resize it? Can't do that. All right, well, let me just change the volume. Okay, it seems like we can do that to the channel strip, but it seems like the region itself is not. See, I could play with pan. What about the plugins? All right, let's turn on this EQ. Okay, we can do stuff with the plugins, but you can't mess up this data. So I think this is imperative once you lock something in. So that's one way. It's non-committal, but what if you want to burn the information in? You know how I chose 16th notes and let's just pretend I changed the dynamics and the gate time, cue velocity is up, swing is up, yada, yada. If I want to burn all of this, it looks like we can go here, apply all parameters permanently. Let's try it. Okay, something happened. Wasn't expecting all that. What was that? Let's hit Command Z. So it looks like it took all this processing and it just burned it. Now, what's fascinating to me is I don't even have cue length on and I see the length change. So what is that about? Well, let's find out. It says here, this means that all settings are actually written as data and playback parameters revert to normal values. The audible result remains the same. Audible results remain the same. Oh, okay. So then things are going to look different, but they're going to sound the same. That's what I'm assuming they mean. Let's be sure about this, to be honest. Let's go ahead and do that. And then let me change a couple things here. Move some stuff around. All right, let's see how this works. Functions, MIDI region parameters, all parameters permanently. Okay, I'll hit S. All right, if I hit Command Z, theoretically, this, oh geez, hold on. Okay, let's listen to this. Okay, hold on, functions. It's just up here. Is this the same? Curious. No. Looks like a condensed version. So MIDI region parameters, apply all parameters permanently. Looks like, okay, let me just make some changes here. Okay, let's move some stuff around here. Okay, functions, not there, here. MIDI transform, region parameters, all, Control N. Nothing's changing. Here, let me make this easy. Here. Okay, let's go here. Okay. So, boom. And we'll change some of these values. Okay. There. Cue velocity, cue length, cue range, cue strength. All right, let's listen to this. Okay, so let's look at the screen here. Control N applies everything permanently. Okay, so theoretically everything should sound exactly the same. Okay, now with that in mind, Command Z is go back to the original performance. Let's see what this sounds like. Sounds a little different to me. Let's try it one last time. I think it does sound different. Try one last time. Control N. Undoing it. Let's try it one last time. Let me know what you think. Do you hear a difference? All right, so this claims that it basically burns all the information and then the playback is the same. So you're just visually seeing all of the changes. I mean, it's interesting because we can already see the changes, so I just don't understand what the difference is. Maybe it's Q range that changes everything. Again, there's just not enough information for us to like infer what the correct answer is. So, but we have more information, and that's a start. So it looks like the loop parameter and advanced quantization parameters in Q velocity, Q length aren't affected. However, use this carefully as you lose the ability to change your mind about MIDI region edits. Okay, so wait a minute. It says here that these settings will not change. I'm assuming that this is what they're saying within the MIDI, with the region inspector. And so that's something interesting to think about. But you can also burn in other information like the stored MIDI channels of the regions. And so we're just going to graze by this because I just feel like there's no need for that right now. But we should cover MIDI quantization types. So let's go ahead and cover this and get a word from our sponsors. Here we go. Okay. Let's get back into it. Hope you are well. Eddie Gray. We are covering the user guide and tutorial. Lots of information to dig into. It's multifaceted. There's a lot of moving parts here, so you want to make sure that you kind of look at it piece by piece. And then, of course, the application is really what's going to really change the game. So if I were you, I would go back into the lab when it's time and bring out a session, create a copy so that you make sure you don't mess it up, and then you start working with all the parameters. So do it with music that you really know. It's really challenging if you just bring in a loop, you try and listen to it. If you really write this and work on this with songs that you know, I think you'll get more out of it too. So let's talk about quantization types. All right, this is very important if you really want things to tighten up and just sound pro level. So let's jump right in. Yep. Okay. Boom. Good. Okay, my friends, let's look at MIDI quantization types. We know there's two. There's the classic, which essentially is just going to bring it closest to the nearest beat using the current quantization setting. bar, beat, division, tick. And so if I have this set to a value of like 16th notes, it's going to follow that law, right? It's mathematical in nature, but we use smart quantize by control clicking here. What literally happens, and then there's actually an up and down arrow menu there too. There, you can access something else, something special actually, that I really think you'll like. So it works similarly to flex time for audio regions, but it's not the same. MIDI events near the grid position defined by the Q range settings are analyzed. Okay, so now we're starting to see how this all ties in together. Based on a combined weighting of proximity to the target grid position, that's a mouthful, a reference point or a center of gravity is set up for each group. So based on a combination of weighting of proximity to the target grid position, so I'm assuming that means how close you are to the grid, is set for each group and move to the target grid position. So what I gather from this is that essentially when you play something out, and you can watch my video on this, I describe it in a little bit more detail, it sounds a little bit more natural. So it's going to take your performance and bring it closer to the grid, but not exactly. It's just going to kind of move it so that it sounds a bit tighter in nature. So all MIDI events move proportionally, right? And that's kind of the key word there. It's like they're not all going to move there. It's all proportional based on how far the other MIDI events are, how close they are, and the reference point being the grid itself. How far each event moves is determined by the Q strength setting. So that's important to highlight as well, because if you want it to move farther or closer, then you're going to have to play with Q strength. And that is right here. So there is definitely a deep relationship going on here that needs to be unearthed. I really believe it. And this is something that I'll be focusing on when my time is done here, giving you this content. I really want to work on this data and bring the best courses, the most digestible information in the market. So really, you don't have to read the manual, right? You just kind of pick up the information that you need to get, and then you run with it. I don't believe everybody has to learn this at the highest level. That's completely irrelevant. At that point, you're losing yourself, and your music is losing because you're confusing learning with productivity, right? Now, obviously, if you want to be a logic sensei, then that requires a certain level of discipline and commitment. But if you're just trying to make music, then you just need to learn what it is you need to learn, and then just keep pushing. And of course, when it's time to learn more techniques, more tasks, more tactics, strategies, then you come back to the sensei. But otherwise, you just stay on your path. So let's see how this differs from the classic quantization method. All the MIDI events keep their original order. See, they're not going to the grid, similar to an audio region edited using flex time. This includes not only the notes, but the MIDI data types, such as pitch bend, control change events, MIDI CC. In many cases, smart quantize can produce more natural sounding results than classic quantization. So if you're looking, when I teach my courses and classes and consultations, that's what I would say. I wouldn't go through all the rigor of, talking about all this. I would just create a conversation piece where I say, hey, if you want something to sound a bit more natural, let's use smart quantize. And of course, that all depends on, is it going to be 16th notes or 8th notes? But still, you would use smart quantize. And if you need something to sound a bit more electronic, mechanical, machine-like, let's use classic quantize. For example, in a MIDI piano performance, the notes of quickly arpeggiated chords keep their relative position, as do sustain pedal on and off events. Another useful situation is in MIDI drum performances that need some quantizing, but where classic quantization would I'm going to say destroy or mess up, but distort rolls, flams, or other notes not played strictly on the beat, and also possibly by the relative position of the hi-hat on and off events. In both cases, Smart Quantize keeps a relative position of note on, note off, and CC events. So the relative position is really what we're looking at here. Okay, this is a fantastic feature. I really do like it. Let's see if we can pull up. Let's go my default patch. Let me go ahead and get these out of the way. Oops, not that one. So what we're going to do right now is pull up a piano patch, maybe some drums, we'll see. And we'll quantize, and we'll see how they both work. See what they sound like. All right, this is probably bugging out on me. Okay, there it is right there. Let me go ahead and create that patch one more time. Okay, so I have a default patch. Actually, it's something we haven't even talked about. You know how you open up the dialog window here? You actually create a default patch that pops up every single time if you wanted to, or an empty channel strip. And how you do that is, well, you create it, you save it in the library, key command Y, okay? And then once you find it under patches, then you want to go ahead and control click it, define as default. You can do this both for audio and MIDI. Okay, so I've got this thing here. Let me see here. Okay. All right, so then I'm just going to play something out. And let's listen to the click. Okay. Awesome. Shift R captures the performance. So we know that it was fairly on time, but not necessarily on the grid. So if I wanted to completely crush the soul of this performance, I would hit Command A and I would hit Q. So everything is now on the grid. Listen to this. It's on the grid, but it's not necessarily in time. But I just want you to listen to it. So just take a listen and then we'll fix it further. Okay, so then let's nudge this where it's supposed to be, which is right there. But we quantize it. It's all perfectly neat on the grid. Right? It doesn't sound natural. And so if we wanted to sound a little bit more natural, what I would suggest is we hit Command Z, and then we go here to Smart Quantize, and we say, hey, we want to change up the game here. Now I'm still going to set this at a value of 16th notes, but now it's going to feel a little bit more real. Check it out. See, that's a lot more similar to my performance, like what I actually played, as opposed to this, which is just very loose and just really not in time. So that is what Smart Quantization can do for you. Again, probably the best way of doing this is with drums as well. If I pull up, let's just do a quick rock drummer. Just want to show you a little hack. Sometimes if you're just looking for a quick drummer and you don't want to look around, I usually will hit R and it says, hey, this is not, a track you can record on, but can you please just, create a new track? And it just does it for me. So you don't have to do it that way. I'm just throwing it out there. All right, let's do the same thing here. This time I'll hit R. Okay, so then, sure, we can go ahead and subjugate this piece to the latest, quantized MIDI workflow. Double click, double click, Command A, Q. But again, it's going to take something out of it. We're talking more, metaphysically now. It's going to take some soul and some emotion out of it. Right, and of course, some of it was played rather not good and not tight. So, if we then go into Smart Quantize though, and we say, hey, we would like this to be a little bit different. Let's listen to this. So it is on the grid, but it's imperfectly on the grid. Check it out. So it's just going to feel a little bit more real. It's a really nice feature. Go ahead and check that out. Let's go into the actual quantized parameters. Okay, so now we understand that there's two quantization methods. And then now we're going to look at the actual parameters. So we know this is non-destructive, right? It adjusts the playback, but it's not necessarily embedding the information. The original positions are kept in the regions. So this is where the information is kept, embedded in the MIDI, in the region or audio region, or you understand what I'm saying. The original positions are kept in the region, so you can go back to the original timing. Now, what would be cool to know also is, if I burn this, we just learned earlier that we can apply all the parameters. Is it burned indefinitely, or can we go back? Like if I hit Command Z, yeah, okay, so you can go back as well. So I do like this feature though, burning this in permanently. I think it's interesting for sure. You make a change and you just want it locked in. Like if I wanted 30-second notes with some velocity or what have you, and then I apply this. It's interesting how all of this goes back to zero, right? You saw velocity. And so this is kind of a way of resetting back the region back to default. So I'm just kind of looking at it and considering the value. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's go from start from the bottom. No quantization, right? Finest possible timing resolution, which is unquantized. Then we go into normal, right? Whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th. Again, probably the most popular is 16th, maybe eighth notes as well, depending on how fast or slow your song is. Then we go into triplets. So depending, do you remember the drum loop I had here earlier? I was using that in order to pull that off because that's not a regular, kind of 4 on the floor beat. That had a different vibe to it. Oh, and by the way, see how I'm scrolling up and it's taking like forever? One of the things I like to do is I'll take the slider on the right-hand side, okay, and I'll just drag it up. It's just so much more faster. I just want to throw that out there. A lot faster. Okay, so yeah, like this guy, for example. You're not going to be able to pull off a quantization of quarter notes on this because that's just not the way it's played back. Take a listen. Like if I try and get that to adhere to 16th notes, check out how great this sounds. It sounds like he's drunk, right? And so we want to apply triplets to get this to really work. Let's try eighth note triplets. I'm not sure. All right, so this is why you have to know this stuff so you can try and understand its application. So let's see how far we can get here today. We know that we have a swing quantization value. So that menu can be found a little bit lower inside of the quantization menu here, right? 16th note swing, eighth note. We can find out when that is applicable. So when you want this to be delayed by the position of every second point, so really big for hip hop, urban, let's say, maybe some jazz, stuff like that. you can also manually alter the swing factor of any quantized value. So you can also hit 16th notes and then play with the swing value and probably yield similar results. That's not what they said, but that's what I'm assuming. Then you have some odd meters, right? 5 tuplet, 5/4. So yeah, that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's great time signature. A lot of great songs are in that. Then we have, let's see, 5. So we have 10 beats or 1 bar, which is basically this but doubled. One of my favorites, 7, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Great time signature. I love to write in 7, 8. And 9 tuplet. 9 beats. I don't think I've ever done a song on 9. It's coming. 2021. Let's go. 9 tuplet. I'm doing it. Mixed quantization. These combine straight and tuplet values. So 16th and 18th. Wow, that's awesome. Mixed quantization always applies to both note values and requires greater playing precision when recording. So that next level stuff there. All right. So here it is, my good friends. When you're using the swing settings, you're going to want to take a screenshot of this. This is going to become relevant. This will become applicable at some point. Trust me. So let me go ahead and highlight this. I want it. I need it. And yeah, let's listen to this. So swing A to F. Here we go. Let's just start 16th notes and take it from there. Hope you're enjoying your Friday. Happy Friday, y'all. Eddie Gray reading the Logic User Guide. This tutorial is brought to you by Resources for the Modern Creative. Go ahead and sub. Go ahead and share. And as always, this is brought to you by hfmusicacademy.com. We need to make sure that we always just give thanks because they're really providing the infrastructure here to make this happen, to make this space occur. All right, so let's go ahead and listen to this. We're going A through F using the quantization value of 16th swing A. So that is definitely funky. You can hear how like every second note is kind of like not stuttering, but hesitating. So it gives it a very unique feel. We'll have to do more tests, but let's, we're here. Let's just listen. So again, the same results can be achieved by just 16th notes and then playing with the quantization swing. So take a listen to this. Certainly does not sound as good as what we were hearing before. Let's go with C. Yeah, so now this is really being butchered. Let's go to 8th notes and let's see if this performs a little bit better. It doesn't look like it. You see how it separated all the notes? Here, let's close this up so you have a better view. Well, that creatively could work though. You put like some filters on there. Here, check this out. Hold on. Yeah, that could be good. All right, so that makes sense. I think we need another beat or something. I think that'd be a little bit more helpful. See if we could do some boom, bap. You have anything for me? No. Yeah. Yep, that's the one. That's the one. Command U. O closes. Let's go ahead and enable that. All right, let's take a listen to this. This doesn't look right. Yeah, no thank you. I want that stretched out. So what we're going to do is, I wonder if there's a faster way of doing it. So what I was going to do is just grab it and stretch it out. Just wonder if there's a better way of doing that. Yeah, that's loop. I don't want to loop it. Hold on. Let me just do one last thing. So this is really interesting. Hold on. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the tempo because this is a little slow for this. Hold on. Okay. And so then I'll go into quantize. Is it going to change? Oh, man, it changes it. Really fascinating how that's happening. Yeah, I think what's going on is, I have to have it on in order for it to, yeah, like, okay, so this is interesting because it was originally recorded at 85 beats per minute, and you know, I'm doubling it. So in order to facilitate what I'm trying to do is it's trying to, you know, figure out what to do. So let me see if I change this to 85, will that be better? Oh, now it's just the other way around. Let me see if I click on that. Okay, wow, that was quite the workaround. But you know, part of the reason we're here again is, like, you know, you get to see kind of some of these ways to work the system. Probably won't be a bad idea to actually just burn it to audio, Control B, and so now that data is kind of built into this file here down here. So let me go ahead and just chop it up properly. All right, so now we're listening to this. Okay, let's delete this one. Here we go. So you turn on quantization, 16th notes. Sounds like this. Let's change the sound of the click so you can hear it. I really want you to reference this very closely here. So we're just going to change the tonality. Listen to the sound of the click. Okay, so it got a little louder, but generally speaking, that's just the tone. Maybe it just was more audible, not necessarily louder. All right, so then we're going to press play, and we're going to listen to this at different quantization values. So this is 16th note. Here's 8th note, which should honestly sound pretty much the same. Okay, let's do a quarter note. It looks all the same because it's all on time. It's not really changing anything. Okay, see, now it's not even reading anything. If I go to 64th, it's going to read it to the letter. Okay, but the magic happens when we try and use the swing thing. Let's see if this changes anything. So I'm not sure if you noticed what happened there. It actually moved this one over. Look at this. See how it's moving every second and fourth over here? Let's go quantize and let's go C. See that? Check it out. So if you're bobbing your head over there, basically you are a victim to swing. All right, here's just down the middle, right? Nothing fancy, just straight old vanilla. Here we go. But look how much funkier this gets. I mean, seriously, the funk value just it's just gonna stink. That's a funk thing. But anyway, here we go. All right, so if you've ever wondered why your music has no feel, it's probably because you're just not applying any swing. Now, it gets a little tricky because you have other instruments, and so you really have to kind of learn this, from the bare bones. Like, take your time, in other words. Build a song and really get the bass and the drums to fit well. I mean, that sounds absolutely incredible compared to just this. Let's turn it on. Yeah, that's pretty nasty. I really like that. Let's go to 8th notes. I'm curious to see if how this is changing and how it's affecting the 2nd and 4th waveforms. Okay, that looks, is it on the grid? Yeah, it looks like it didn't do anything, but let's listen. Nah, it looks pretty much the same. Look at the waveforms. Forget about everything else. Look at the waveforms. Boom. Oh yeah, you're gonna feel it. You ready? Here we go. Wow, now that's really pulled. Do you hear that? Do you feel that? In fact, here, close your eyes for this next one, okay? Forget about what I'm saying. Just close your eyes and just feel this. Bob your head to it. It might feel a little awkward. That's the point. Here we go. So that's super urban, very different, right? Again, let's just go with the A. So it's going to feel very normal. This one's not really affecting, I mean, very little here I can see. Here, it's barely moving it. But generally speaking, it's on the money. Take a listen. but it still sounds pretty cool. I mean, that's definitely, you can hear the difference between that and, let's turn it off. It sounds like a loop in Logic Pro, whereas if I just apply some swing to it, let's go hard with 8th swing F for fun at 21. Here we go. So that overdid it, right? You can hear that it's pulling the audio so much that it's changing the fidelity. It's stretching out the transits and waveforms so much that it's not working. So let's go a little bit less down. Let's meet somewhere in the middle. Swing D. Let's try it. So still pretty cool, but maybe a little bit of a stretch where right here, I think we really find that pocket. Take a listen. Very cool. All right. My good friends, we have covered swing at great length. It looks like they're just covering it again for some reason. I'm pretty sure unless I was just, yeah, it looks like maybe I went ahead. Or, I'm sorry, we covered it with audio because I was doing both. So they cover the advanced quantization parameters, which we've covered extensively. Feel like the only one left to really conquer is that guy right there. Look for some more content coming soon. We know Q flam, we know Q velocity, and we know what Q length does as well. I wasn't prepared to stop, but I think this is a good time for now, my good friends. I wanted to wish you the very best Friday. Thank you so very much for our time together. Guys, in the process of doing this for you, I'm getting so much from this, and I just wanted to thank you personally. If you need anything, if you're finding this of value, reach out to us. Support at hfmusicacademy.com. The response has been just so cool, so overwhelming to see you guys really grow and build your Logic experience. And so we just want to be a part of your story. It's very simple. We win, you win, and I mean, that's the way it's supposed to go, right? There has to be somebody who's come before you, stands up and says, hey, I want to make sure that everything is accounted for. Everyone's going to win in my camp, and I want to be part of your story. It's pretty simple. I want to see you win. I've seen a lot of people win. I've helped a ton of people make a ton of money in the music industry, and now I want to help you. So if there's ever anything that you need, seriously, educational resources. We just helped a fine gentleman, was emailing us about our Taylor Hawks drum series. We want to make sure that he was accounted for, so we gave him the information. Yeah, support at hfmusicacademy.com. It's been a long week, but we ain't done yet, because we know that tomorrow we're going to come back and we're going to look at the audio regions in the audio track editor. So if you've ever wanted to learn how to use this, we're going to cover it at length. Let's see here. All things cutting, copying inside here. This is all non-destructive editing, so we will be doing that. We'll be automating within the audio track editor, and then we'll be editing MIDI regions in the piano roll editor as well. So if you're interested in that, I will certainly catch you tomorrow. Keep growing, keep learning, keep evolving, and keep your frequency high. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Cheers.